Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jose Plasencia from Progressive Wave Radio, and we have a very special guest today, a person who I truly admire and look up to, Ms. Gloria La Riva. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Gloria. One of my first questions that I wanted to ask you, how would you describe the current situation with these Trump camps, concentration camps, that our current administration is imposing? Can you describe some of these horrors that are taking place in these camps, and to those people that are not familiar with them, with the current situation, how would you describe it?
They're really torture chambers. They're not just for the children being abused, but the parents as well. Anybody who's in these jails simply for wanting to escape poverty, dangerous conditions in their home countries, and who are being criminalized in the worst way. And as a result of this media and government Trump accusations of them being criminal, they're being treated like criminals. Mm-hmm. So there's a complete disregard, and it would have continued except for the exposure by reporters from different media and the public, which has made their way in, including some politicians who have snuck out images, and it's very frightening. I mean, I think for anyone, you don't have to be a parent, you have to just be a human being to feel the suffering of the kids who are, in their minds, whether they're babies, children, teenagers, the children I'm talking about, they don't understand why their parents aren't getting them. Mm-hmm. So it's a psychological torture. Yes. It is probably going to have permanent damage to them. Mm-hmm. And already there's at least 1,500, probably even more, who are permanently lost. Yeah. That the government says we don't know where they are because they didn't care. Take them away from their parents. There have been some judges who have given parental rights to other people. Their parents have lost their rights. And these children are lost forever. Yes. So this is one of the greatest crimes that we are seeing. Mm-hmm. And yet we have to be clear that this whole treatment of millions of people threatened by, being in jail or threatened by deportation didn't begin with Trump. Yes. It intensified during the Clinton administration. Exactly. I mean, we've seen immigration used as a weapon or as a tool by the U.S. government in waves. When there was a great labor shortage, then there was somewhat better treatment or more open borders. Yes. But what Clinton did in 1996 with his legislation that he signed was to make it much more onerous for people coming from Central America, anybody who would cross the border, and versus people who would come by a visa, who would fly in from Europe or elsewhere. So it's been made a lot harder. For example, if you cross the border and they have a status, something like non-interviewed, something like that, then you're automatically in a category where if you are found or you try to apply for asylum or something, you have to leave the country for 10 years. Oh, yeah. But if someone overstays a visa coming in from abroad, not from the border, you can stay in the U.S. while you appeal. Yes. So that's just one small part of it. Obama and his administration deported hundreds of thousands. It was a record deportation. Yes. And remember that when he became president, for the first 2 years, there was a majority Democrat in the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And he became president in 2009, relatively shortly after the great marches and mobilizations, the biggest mobilizations we have ever seen in the country of the undocumented, yes, who didn't even have any rights, who could face deportation and arrest, and yet they came out by the millions and shut down the packing houses by their absence. Restaurants, it was a historic day. But then the repression began in the Obama administration. And the problem is that there's no legal process. There's no legalization process because the Republicans and Democrats have been playing this football for
Yes,
years
exactly.
now. Well, that's what I think.
No. Yeah. No, which leads me to my next question. How would you fix this situation right now with the concentration camps and so on? What would your first
Open
step
them up
be?
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Open them up immediately. There's many people in the U.S. who would accept them.
Mm-hmm.
Churches.
Yes.
There's plenty of room for that, for people to be welcomed, to be given a home, to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of the U.S. policy would need to be stop interfering in other countries.
Yes.
The U.S. Under Obama again, in June 2009, overthrew the democratically elected government
Oh, yes.
of Venezuela,
Yes.
who was turning in a leftward direction in a way that would have helped restore the economic ability of the whole country of Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
And instead what we see now is this great nightmare where tens of thousands of Hondurans are escaping. In last November, I went with another member of the PSL. For 8 days, we accompanied the caravan from 3 states up until Mexico City.
Yes.
And we were with them. 90% of the 7,000 in that famous march were Honduran. 5% Salvadoran, 5% Guatemalan. And what they need is the right to live at home.
Yes, exactly.
Stop interfering in other countries for the resources and exploitation.
Yes.
Left alone, they would be fine. Lift the sanctions on Venezuela.
Yes.
Lift the blockade on Cuba. The U.S. media is making a big deal. They claim 3 million, 5 million, 7 million. They keep upping the numbers in exaggerated figures, claiming that Venezuelans are leaving their country. It is part of a portrayal that they're making in the media and the government to try to overthrow that government. So the whole issue of migration, refugee crisis is used as a weapon against Venezuela, against Mexico. And what nobody mentions is that since 1966, for 53 years now, the U.S. has had a law on the books called the Cuban Adjustment Act that gives a privileged position to Cubans who come into the country, who get social services, immediate permission to work, and permanent residency in a year and a day
Yes.
of their arrival. And that's used to drain the country of Cuba from its workers, from anybody who would like to leave the country, as to attack a socialist country.
Yes,
But
exactly.
Mexicans are treated like criminals, and Central Americans,
Yes.
and anybody, Haitians. There's thousands of Haitians
Yes.
hoping to come in.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would say this: open borders, because there's already an open border. The U.S. corporations are flooding products into Mexico since the NAFTA agreement, and other countries in Latin America. They have taken over much of the resources of Mexico.
Yes.
So the open borders is one way. Make it both ways. And remember, my mother's from Mexico. My mother's from Chihuahua. I grew up in Albuquerque, so all our cousins are from Mexico. And in these different periods of U.S. policy, it used to be very open, here in El Paso. People would come into the city to go to school or work and come back home because people in Mexico prefer to live in their country. California, you would see tens of thousands of farm workers, maybe hundreds of thousands, come in for the crops, the harvest, go up all the way to Ohio, the Midwest, and go back home,
Yes, I
which is
remember.
their home. And now, in these last years, many years, if you enter the U.S., then you are stuck. You can't even go home to see your family, and vice versa.
Yes.